I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geeknights. Tonight, we talk about my new computer.
Let's do this.
So I was all set to talk about how I got to leave work early because the power went out in Yonkers. Probably because it was the first hot day and everyone's air conditioning was on. But no.
I'll tell you, there's nothing people love more in New York and the tri-state area than blackouts. We love blackouts.
Oh, yeah, because nothing bad ever happens during a blackout. No siree.
Nope, it's awesome. Everyone gets to go home. Everyone has a big laugh. It's a nice change of pace. It makes the day exciting. It's way cool.
Yeah, actually, I remember during the big Northeast power outage, the biggest problem, I got home from work just fine. And I sit in my house and I think, all right, this is going to be fun. I directed traffic for a while, started getting dark, I went home. And then I went to eat and I realized that I didn't have any food except food that needed cooking. That's fine. I got a gas stove. And I turn it on and I realized that, electric ignition.
Yeah, but even with a gas stove, you could light it with like a lighter.
Oh, yeah, a lighter or a match or something. But there weren't any in the house.
Well, you can go to the store and get some.
Oh, yeah, so I went to the store. And they were all closed because they didn't have any electricity.
The gas station's open.
Gas station wouldn't sell anything because they didn't have any electricity to run their stuff. They would not take money. They would not sell things.
There are some places that will stay open in a blackout.
I couldn't find any. And after an hour, I went back home. I opened a can of cold ravioli and I ate it. And then I went to sleep.
Ew.
They wouldn't even sell me anything at all. I walked into the gas station and I was like, can I at least buy a Gatorade?
Maybe this is why looting is so rampant.
Yeah, because I really needed to buy that 42-inch gas plasma just as the power went out.
I know, exactly.
But no, I'm not going to talk about that. Because a little while ago, I almost burned the house down.
Wait. Why did you almost burn the house down?
Well, you see, we have a lot of computers in our house.
Too many.
We have more computers than we have need for at this point, which is great, because I love that. But fortunately...
Actually, I think someone out there might need a computer. We should get rid of one.
Well, see, the thing is... I've realized now that there's a law in the universe that states that if Rim and Scott have too many computers, catastrophe will befall one of them in short order, thus restoring balance to the force.
Well, I would argue that catastrophe had already befallen this computer.
Probably twice, 2 or 3 times at least. The long story short is, we had one computer called Jameson, because it was shaped like a box.
$20 motherboard.
It had a $20 motherboard. It was in a case that was basically cursed in many ways.
We've replaced everything in that case except the case and the power supply, and it caused the same problem with 2 different computers.
So, we used it as our Skype box. I kept it next to my computer because you can't easily record Skype in Linux, and I have the nice mixer, and especially when my old computer was slow, I just have this little box here, and it would take care of the Skype, and we could do whatever we wanted to do, get people on, interview them. And I had my new computer, so I cleaned up my room, redid my desk, put it all back together, and today... in the AC, since I got home from work really early, I decided to plug good old Jameson back in and set him back up at the Skype box. Now that my cables were all nice and cable tied, so I stick him down there, I plug him in, I turn him on, I plug him into my monitor, and I look, and sure enough, it notices that the disc hasn't been fisked in a while, and it was mounted a bunch of times because I kept using that USB thing, so it starts fisking the disc, and I go downstairs. An hour later, Scott comes home. All right, let's go get a P.O. box. We need a P.O. box and all that business. So we head out. And just before we're about to actually leave, I run up to my room to get my wallet. And I open the door to my room, which is sealed shut, air conditioning. And I smell burning. I smell electrical fire.
Awesome.
And I'm very well acquainted with the smell due to some incidents at IBM back in the day.
I'm very well acquainted with the smell with many computers that set on fire.
Yes. So I'm frantically going around the room looking for whatever is on fire, trying to determine if this is an emergency yet or not. And I'm half debating running downstairs and just hitting the breaker before I come back up. Eventually, I track down the smell to the computer area, and I think, oh, no. And I move my mouse, and my computer's fine. So I hit the source button on the LCD, and Jameson's not working so well anymore.
I wonder, maybe that $20 motherboard has something to do with it.
Maybe.
Maybe that cursed power supply and case has something to do with it.
Now, I was particularly worried because on Jameson's hard drive is the entirety of the archives of Geeknights.
Awesome.
Because Jameson was the backup. So, I go down there, and sure enough, the smell of burning is overpowering, and the case is hot to the touch. So I unplug it, and I kind of push it out of the room.
Good plan.
Yeah, so it's sitting downstairs. I plugged it in a couple more times, now that in a safe condition. Somewhat safe. Scott left the room every time I did it to see what was wrong. I think it's the power supply.
Yeah, I would if I had to plug it in, I would have done it outside with the extension cord from far away.
See, the thing is, I knew it wasn't going to explode or anything.
It could have.
Not really. The only
You could have had some capacitors going pop, pop, pop.
I've had that before.
It's dangerous.
At IBM. Not that dangerous.
Pretty dangerous.
Not really. Plus, the top
I'd
was
like to
on.
avoid it.
They wouldn't have gotten me.
That's
I
fine.
wasn't too worried.
I need safety goggles before I'll get close.
Yeah, suffice to say, that computer is now to dead, and between that and my old computer, Shezar, I think we've got to pull out all the relevant parts and make one computer out of them again.
I think we do. Maybe it's time.
I don't think the motherboard survived. That's just my guess.
No. I think, yeah, we'll probably just make a new egg order for, because I'm going to get another hard drive and RAM for my computer.
I'll probably get a couple more hard drives to make some sort of Linux RAID.
And then we'll buy a case for whatever we can put together.
I'll buy probably I'll buy the second cheapest case on Newegg.
That's still a bad case.
Hey, it's not the cheapest case.
You
Which
can
is
get a
basically a
good one.
cardboard box full of razor blades.
We can get a good one for like $40. That'll be actually good.
$40? That's more than twice what I spent on that computer.
It doesn't matter. That computer's broken. So
The motherboard might
for
be
$40,
okay.
it would be working, and it would have never had a problem.
So, yeah, now, despite the fact that it's really hot out, all my windows are open to dissipate the smell of burning.
Well, also because the windows might as well be open if the air conditioner is off, and we turn the air conditioner off when we do the show because it makes a lot of noise, and I sit right in front of it. And that means doing Geek Nights in the summer, it's hella hot. Hella hot.
No, it's not,
Yeah, it
because
is.
usually the room is like 70 when we start doing the show, and it only gets up to about 76 by the time we're done.
I know, I'm pretty hot. I got this laptop on my lap and such.
You know why? You know why you're hot? Because the air conditioning's not on.
Yeah, and I'm sitting in this squishy chair, and
Yeah.
yeah, but so I think in the summer the shows are gonna go faster, just out of I want to go into my air-conditioned room.
Well, after the burning smell is gone from the room, I'm definitely going to re-equip the air conditioning.
Good idea.
All right, so what do you got in the news?
This isn't so much a news because there were some tech newses, but I didn't really care. I don't know if this isn't even tech at all, but I don't know. I liked it. Basically, some guy started a blog called Unexpected Truths. He put up one article in April and one in June, and this is his second article, the one from June 16th, and it got dug, so I noticed it, and it's not correct. Basically, I can just argue against it with 1 point and defeat it, but it is partially correct. Basically, this guy makes an argument, and he says that if you have a really hard standardized test, right? Like stupidly hard, then it's actually less meaningful. And this is his logic, right? His logic is this. Let's say I'm Scott, and I know one thing about, I don't know, pick a topic I know nothing about.
I don't know, living, podcasting.
Aerospace engineering, right?
Let's go with quantum physics.
All right, I know one thing about quantum physics, right? Then you bring in another guy who's a quantum physicist, and he knows, I don't know, 5 times as much as I do about quantum physics.
But what happens when you multiply by 0?
Yeah, okay. Anyway,
All right, enough snipping.
yes. So then you give us a test, right? And the test has, 100 questions, right? Let's say I know enough to get 10 questions right, and he knows enough to get 50 questions right. Since it's so hard that 50 of the questions are just so hard that neither of us know them, then basically half the test is guessing. So a harder test like that, where the knowledgeable person is equally difficult, has to guess also, makes it better for me as the dumber person. And that the ideal test would be one where if you were knowledgeable, you could get them all right, and if you weren't knowledgeable, you would get them all wrong.
Well, you see, it depends, because that really seems to rely on the fact that it's a limited number of multiple choice questions.
Yes, he does say this only counts in a multiple choice test where you only count the correct answers.
Yeah, and also, a lot of tests mitigate that by you can choose not to answer a question, but if you do choose to answer it, you lose points if you get it wrong.
Yep,
In
that's the
addi-
SAT used to work. I don't know if it still works that way.
I don't know how the SAT works anymore. I never
Yeah.
even took it.
Yes, but basically, the argument, this does sort of make sense, though. It's not 100% correct, because I could just say, you can't really quantify human knowledge in that way. I mean, obviously, sure, the quantum physicist doesn't know them all, but he can make educated guesses on a lot of them and eliminate multiple choices on, many of them, which I could not do, and therefore his odds of getting a better score are better than mine, and such and
Plus,
such and such.
I can relate when I was in high school, in 10th grade, when I took AP Biology. And it was a class of like 11 people. It was this little seminar class. We're basically free to do whatever we wanted. And the tests were incredibly difficult. The tests were designed for someone who already had a degree in biology or the relevant fields. So we're talking about genetics, then it was that super hard about genetics. And the class average was always around 30%.
Yep.
And all it really did was force everyone to, you really had to strive for a lot more than you actually needed to pass the AP test. Because by the end of the class, we were averaging around 50%. So when we went to take the actual AP test, we were so used to these basically hammer you in the face questions that we all got 5s on the test like that.
Ah.
But then again, that doesn't mean that the tests we took in the class were really a useful measure of intelligence, because it was generally a useful measure of intelligent guessing, like Scott was saying.
Yes. But regardless, while his argument is not 100% correct, I do think that, incredibly, stupidly difficult tests are sort of not good at measuring intelligence anyway, at least to a point.
Yeah, but I would make the opposite argument that you don't want to test, especially if you're trying to differentiate between people of varying skill, that has too low of a cap. Because then you can't differentiate between people who are very intelligent.
That's why what I would do if I was making a test,
Two
right?
rounds?
No. 2 rounds is okay.
Nah.
I would make the first question, right, the easiest possible question, right? And I would make the last question the hardest possible question. And that way, everyone would start failing at a certain point along the way. And maybe I would randomize them, instead of doing them in order. But basically, when I did the grading, I could unshuffle them and look at them from easy to hard, and then just look at your score as like a line with maybe some holes in it if you messed up on a few problems. And then you could really see, okay, that guy's a freaking genius. He got all the ones near the end. Okay, that guy only made it a third of the way through. Instead of having this test where half the questions are impossible and basic, like that, where it's pretty useless.
Well, actually, another example, just from my high school, in AP Physics, the way he did it was there'd always be 10 questions on a test. But you had a very short amount of time to actually do the test, and you weren't expected to complete them all. They weren't multiple choice. Each one was a very complex, physics problem.
Yep.
And there were 10.
And you could choose which ones to do?
Just do whichever ones you can. That way, he made that so difficult and not enough time to where the loadout of the scores and the way the scores were disseminated at the end very much reflected how proficient everyone was in the class. It was a very good measure, I think.
Yeah.
I was so at one time, I got 6 right. And that was crazy. There's this one kid who got 8 once, 4 years before we got there.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. I just thought it was pretty interesting, and this does look like a blog to me that's pretty much trying to become popular, and I don't know, he wrote 2 things. I didn't read the first thing he wrote, but...
Maybe he is taking the strategy that I used to take posting on Slashdot.
Maybe. It's just a Blogspot blog from some guy, so whatever. I'll link to it. Why not?
See, lately I found that whenever a blog talks about something like that, or whenever they bring up a topic or a question, I never bother reading the blog, because I see the question on Dig, if it was an interesting question, and I just read the Dig comments, and I probably get more out of it than...
See, actually, that would have bitten me in this case, because on Dig, the headline was The Fallacy of Hard Tests, and I thought it was going to be about how the tests aren't really hard, everyone says this is so hard to test, but it's not. And you can actually just pass the tests, and blah, they're bullshit. And then I read it, and that's not what it was about.
Nah. So, a while ago, we talked about a judge who didn't really know what a website was.
Oh,
and,
the lady in Connecticut?
All right, so arguments aside from that. No, not that.
Oh,
not
the
that.
other one, the English one.
Well, this is the other one.
Okay.
So, I'm just going to read the Slashdot bit here, because I think it says it all. In an impressive example of the gap of understanding between legal officials and technology, U.S. magistrate, some woman, found that a computer server's RAM, or random access memory, if you will, if I may, is a tangible document that can be stored and must be turned over in a lawsuit. Now,
he can have it.
Now, think about this for a minute. This judge is basically saying that you have to turn over the contents of your RAM because there's
The
evidence there.
contents of the RAM or the actual RAM? Because it is possible to copy the data that is presently in the RAM to like a CD or something or DVD.
I
and then
point
give
out that is equally useless because the data in the RAM is transient, and I highly doubt that the court proceeding is taking place at a time where whatever data they wanted is still in RAM.
I
anyway.
know that, but it is possible to take a snapshot of the current data in RAM if that is useful.
Plus, while I
Like,
didn't...
for example, you could potentially set up a computer with a service that logs to a space in RAM, and maybe it doesn't log that much, or maybe you have so much RAM that you can hold on to those logs, and thus a snapshot of that RAM would be something you might want to put in the court. It's possible.
I couldn't read the article because it was slash-dotted, and I didn't want to really search for it.
All right.
But it seems that the judge really doesn't understand and thinks somehow
I think that's obvious.
that they can get the data that they want from the RAM. They're mad because Torrent Spy, according to them, doesn't keep records. So I guess the judge must have found out about RAM and said, well, wouldn't the data be in there? Because it has to be in there at some point, not understanding that it's not there anymore.
All right. Well, all I can say is, where the hell were the expert witnesses?
You know, I wonder that more and more every day.
Maybe there aren't any expert witnesses.
Well, when it comes to computers, because I ran into the situation today.
If there
where
aren't, I would love the job of expert witness flying around the country, going to courts, getting asked
today
questions
at
about
work,
technology.
It's not that I realize this is a problem. It's more that I ran into this problem again. But it seems like almost every IT problem in the corporate world comes down to a very simple problem. You have a customer and you have the technologist. The customer wants X, but they don't know about technology, but they want some sort of technology to do their job. The technologists know how to make technology, but they don't know anything about the customer or the customer's job. So the customer says, say, I want to be able to print these documents. And the tech guy says, fine, and he gives them a printer, but it might not be the right kind of printer. The tech guy will often solve the wrong problem because the customer doesn't understand the technology enough to know what to ask for. And there don't seem to be any people out there, or at least very few of them, who are capable of talking to the customer, talking to the technologist, figuring out what needs to be done and writing it down.
Well, you see, that's actually, they taught us in school to do that.
Oh, they taught us too.
The problem is not that we're incapable of doing that. Like, if I go to someone's business and I take a look at it for a little while, maybe hang out for an hour or so, see how their business process, I know, figure out what they need. I understand business enough.
Yeah,
to know.
yeah.
The problem is that in the actual business world, while we were taught to do that in school,
no one else does
and I know how to do it, people just don't do it. You go and a customer just comes up and says something. And it's like, wait, I want to talk to you about this and figure out what you need. Just give me something this. I'm like, no, you're not going to be happy. All right, I'll give it to you. But if you complain, you can't say anything. You promised me right now on paper.
Maybe that's because the kind of companies you work for, but it's the opposite with me in the like IBM and these other companies where, you know, there's a customer and they want something big from the company or they want some big technology thing and they need something to do their job. And they know what they want, but the technologists just aren't willing to listen or figure out what they need.
I think those technologists, I think that's a problem that people have realized, and the older technologists who have gone to school or much older than we are in their 30s and 40s didn't learn this.
Yeah.
And then they began teaching it once they realized it was a problem.
Because I'm basically
But now because the older people are still the old way, we're not doing it even though we know how.
Yeah, because I'm basically the fireman. I go around the company putting out the fires when they start. And the fires are always, customer got what they didn't want because no one bothered to listen to them. But when it comes to these, I mean,
there are many cases, I will not deny you tech people out there, of incredibly stupid customers that you just can't deal with.
However, the easy answer is what you want is not feasible. And
of course, the tech guy is never stupid.
No, never. But I think the best answer to this sort of thing is to take the RAM chips and bring them into court and hand them to the judge.
Yeah, I also think that is the best way to do it.
Now, it does remind me, back when Scott and I were younger and more full of vim and vigor, we were trying to figure out how we could mess with computer forensics people. And we realized that if you wanted to commit some sort of piracy internet crime...
Oh, this is a great plan.
The best way to go about it, and I'm really surprised no one has done this yet, or if they have, it hasn't been publicized. So we're basically going to tell you all, and I'm not saying you should do this. In fact, I'm going to say on the record
this is one of those things where it's okay to put bomb instructions on the internet, but it's not okay to make bombs or blow them up.
Yes.
This is what we're about to tell you.
We're trusting you guys Because I think the main reason is
No. Seriously, go and actually do this, because then we will get insane publicity when the news finds out they learned how to do it from some podcast.
yeah,
called Geeknights.
but yet don't actually do it, so I can't get sued.
Exactly.
You see how that works?
Yes.
But for all that aside, we realized that if you wanted to give data to people or put data out there of any kind that is illicit or insightful or in any way would want to be stopped by the man or your government or whoever, this is probably a great idea for dissidents in China.
Yep.
What you do is you take laptops. Particularly, you got to buy secondhand laptops with cash, but that's not hard to do, with
Yeah.
wireless cards.
Cheap-ass ones.
Now, you get a big old battery and stick it to the thing, or if you can...
Or you find somewhere where there's an outlet in public. Like, if you open up the bottom of a street lamp, there's usually an outlet in there.
Yep, or you can wire in and get power if you're smart. It's not that hard to do.
Yep.
So what you do is you take this little laptop with its wireless card and no hard drive.
No
and
hard drive.
No fingerprints, obviously all that stuff. You took the serial numbers off, not that that matters.
Yep.
So you run whatever, you make sure it's within sight of an access point so it'll get on the internet somehow. You make a live CD.
Yep.
A live CD that contains an operating system designed solely to do whatever it is you want to do. Maybe you take
But-
a Knoppix CD, you put an Apache on it, whatever.
Yeah, but you don't you don't set it to automatically do whatever it's going to do on boot, because then by examining the CD, they can figure you out.
No, what you do is you boot this CD,
Yep.
and the CD now loads what it's doing into RAM.
Then you perform the critical steps via the keyboard, and everything is in the RAM. You close the lid, and as soon as you close the lid, you have it rigged in such a way that opening the lid or turning it off or rebooting it or opening the CD drive will just turn the computer off.
And furthermore, you remove the CD just in case. Though, if you wanted to do it optimally, the CD is just a straight up live CD with nothing on it because
That's what I was saying.
You did everything with a flash drive to
And then
the
you
RAM.
took the flash drive away. So basically everything that's illicit that's going on is in the RAM of that computer, and no one can figure out where the computer came from or who's doing it or anything. And the most they can do is just pick up the computer. And as soon as they pick up the computer, and if they try to do any sort of research on it whatsoever, forensics, they're not going to find shit.
Now, even better, a lot of PCs, it's pretty trivial to set up a PC that if it's jostled, it'll turn off or do something.
Yep.
So that's one step further.
The thing is, if it's a laptop like sitting on the street outside of a cafe using the free wireless, then it's probably gonna
Well, no,
be
because
jostled on its own.
yeah, but someone's going to steal it anyway.
Yeah.
But in that case, that's for like the quick spy handoff where you leave the laptop there like you're sitting at the Starbucks, make sure you're wearing a hat, no one can see your face on the cameras, you leave it there, someone walks by, gets the data wirelessly while he's walking.
Yeah. See, the problem with this plan, right? There's only one problem with it, and that is that it's very uneconomical to get all these laptops.
Well, there is another way.
But that's why everyone does things via Windows zombies, right? But the zombies have to start somewhere, and starting them from one of these anonymous laptops is a great way to go. 'Cause
Especially if it started with a cron job that takes place like 3 weeks after you left the thing there.
well, then you have to bet that it's going to sit there for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
You have to hide it pretty well.
Now, if you're
And
gonna,
it has to have a 3-week battery.
yeah. Now, if you wanted to host a whole bunch of data or something big, you rent an apartment with cash in a shady part of town, and you get internet stolen from your neighbor, which is not that hard to do usually.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just have a server, and you have the server rigged up the same way, live CD, maybe a gigantic amount of RAM to hold the data. They shouldn't need that much because I can't
Couple
imagine
gigs.
how much data it would be.
Yeah.
You can get a lot of RAM. And you rig the house up so if any entrance to the house is open, it cuts the power to the computer.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Imagine the forensics guy trying to explain that to the judge. There was nothing in the computer, Your Honor. What do you mean? We see clearly that it was serving the battle plans to the Death Star. But there was nothing in it.
Many
What do you mean
both-
nothing? Nothing.
Many Bothans died trying to get that computer.
Things of the day. Again, I'll be real brief. I don't have a lot to say about this other than that I think it's really neat. Now, sculpture is one thing. You make a sculpture to look like something. Maybe it's some abstract thing. Maybe it's a big naked Greek guy.
Hey, you were about to. I was gonna do that joke.
You were going to do that joke? Well, I guess I already did it.
I
It's
guess-
done.
I
It's
guess-
taken.
yeah.
Naked Greek guy is already out there in the open. There's nothing you can do about him.
All right.
All right. And that's well and good, but what if instead of the sculpture being the art, the shadow the sculpture cast were the art? Now you might say, Rim, that's so like avant-garde, nouveau, whatever term, crap, modern, garbage art. That's not anything interesting. Now, what if you made something, a physical object that didn't in and of itself look like anything? In fact, it looks like a pile of trash. But if you shine a light on it in a certain way, the shadow it casts is nothing like the object, and in fact is a work of art.
That's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. That's what this is. That's all I have to say about that.
All right, my thing of the day is a simple astronomy picture. Well, actually, it is a conglomeration of many astronomy pictures. You see, you look up at the sun, right? And you know that if it's noon, the sun is directly overhead and you have no shadow. And if it's early in the day, the sun is in the east. If it's later in the day, the sun is in the west. You know that in the summer, the sun takes longer to go across because the earth tilts. And in the winter, it takes less time to go across. And all that business, right? Well, what if you had a camera pointed at the sky and the camera didn't move? And like every day, you had the camera take a picture of the sky at, say, 10 a.m. Just pick a time, right? You can see all the different places in the sky where the sun will be at 10 a.m. every day around the year. And it sort of makes this like 8, like this figure 8, or like the infinity. It's kind of angular, you know? And like one day the sun will be really low at 10 a.m. And then the other end of the year, the sun will be really high at 10 a.m. And the shape that it creates in the sky is called the analemma. And here is a picture of the analemma, and they list the dates when the pictures are taken and everything, and it's pretty cool. And you learn something new.
So, it's been long enough, and it's finally up, so I guess it's time to talk a little about my new computer.
Oh, it's a cop-out episode, I think.
Yeah, a little bit, but we
little
actually put it in the schedule a while ago, and we ended up...
You put it in the schedule.
Yeah, well, you agreed to it.
I didn't agree outright. I just did not object.
Well, the main reason we put it in originally was, all right, I got a new computer. We should talk about new hardware or whatever. And you might notice that it's been quite some time since I got that new computer, and we're doing this episode. The computer is just now working as it should be.
All right, well, let's talk about what parts you got for that computer.
All right, well, of course, the only relevant parts were I got a Core 2 Duo E6600, which I still believe is the absolute perfect price point in terms of diminishing returns, dollar per unit performance.
Yes, if you have a lot of money, like a pile of money, go out and get the faster one, because this is not the fastest one available. If you can afford it, there's better ones. But if you're got to save money, but you still need, if you're going to just save money and you don't care about performance that much, you can get like the Core non-2 Duos and like the Core 1 Duos, and for real cheap. But if you are looking to get performance and the money saving at the same time, this is still the best spot.
I can't believe
at
that
least for the time being.
I turned my back on AMD. AMD has been with me for a long time, and I never thought that Intel would have a better chip or a cheaper chip, because Intel was always just so ludicrously expensive and not that much faster.
Yep, I mean, I wavered back and forth. I mean, originally I got Intel because AMD was nothing in those days.
Well, yeah, back in like the K3 days.
Yeah,
K6
well, this was
III.
like before even the K2 days,
Yeah.
almost.
Well, the K6
Like,
too.
I'm talking
K6 III.
1999.
Yeah.
And then AMD just came out and were like, we're faster and cheaper, bitches. And I was like, oh yeah, faster
And it wasn't just
cheaper.
a little bit cheaper. It was like $300 cheaper.
And twice as fast.
Yeah.
And that was AMD for the win. And then I was stuck with AMD because they maintained their cheapness and their competitiveness. But then, and Intel also sort of went down the tubes with their Pentium 4. It was not good. But then, luckily, this one R&D team at Intel basically bailed them out. And the story is like some Israeli R&D team invented the Core Duo, the Core, basically. And then they Core Solo, the Core Duo, et cetera, et cetera. And now AMD not keeping up. They're trying to do their 64-bit thing, but that's not working out so well because the 64-bit OSs are not so hot.
Yeah, I mean, God, I tried to use Ubuntu. Well, I'll get to that. That's a whole other adventure.
We're going to get
here.
to that.
We'll get to that.
All right. But there's one constant, even though Intel and AMD may change, NVIDIA is always the win.
Yep. But luckily, I mean, the thing that really pushed it over, because literally the day before I bought my computer on Newegg, there was a gigantic sale on AMD processors, and they were so cheap. And I still just couldn't rationalize it, because the Core 2 seems like it has so much future potential. And if it comes to it in the future, I actually looked and I could overclock this thing like 4 years from now to keep this computer going a while.
I don't think that's going to be necessary, but it is that much better.
Yes, and it uses practically no power compared to the AMD.
I think that's another major factor is that AMD sort of just kept increasing the horsepower over time and didn't increase the price very much, and that helped out in those days.
Yep. And also, I really got to say, installing the Intel chip, the Core 2 Duo, compared to other CPUs I've installed, was a dream. It just went in so wonderfully.
Yeah, they have a new mechanism that's sort of complicated and foreign.
Yeah,
but it works.
There's no the pins don't go in holes anymore. The pins just go up against these pads, and it's really nice. There's no longer is the fear of fucking up my motherboard or fucking up my processor.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is sort of strange if you've done a lot of, old school socket CPU installations.
But it's so much better.
But it does work. It's not some BS thing.
I mean, it's not as easy as a slot, but the slot had too many drawbacks, so.
The slot is no good.
Yeah, and also, I gotta say, the stock default heatsink cooling mechanism that comes with the Core 2 is absolutely silent. It does not make noise, as far as I can tell.
That's good.
It's beautiful. It goes on like that. It's so easy. It comes with the thermal paste on it. There's no reason to replace it. I can't praise Intel highly enough for the Core 2 Duo. I am so incredibly happy with it.
Anyway.
Yeah. And motherboard-wise, I actually had a lot of consternation because it seems like this generation of motherboards had a lot of trouble with Linux back in December.
Well, a lot of trouble regardless of Linux.
Well, yeah, but Linux in particular.
Yes, also Linux.
I ended up going with the 8-bit AB9 Pro, partly because one, it has 10 serial ATAs.
Which is more than you're going to use.
But two, it had 3 different serial ATA controllers. And I figured that no matter what problems there are with Linux, at least one of those bad basses is going to work. I don't know why I said bad basses.
I don't know. I was going to make a noise of a fish. But
I really didn't. I wasn't going to say badasses. I don't know what I was going to say. I don't know where basses came from.
Bad boys.
The bad boys, badasses. I guess they got merged together.
I guess.
The bad basses of computer science.
Bad boys' asses.
Bad badasses.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, it turned out that there were quite a few problems with the 8-bit AB9 Pro. The least of which was that my computer didn't boot when I first got it. At all. And, I couldn't believe that the awesome Antec power supply I had bought, that had way more power than I need for this motherboard and all my components, was the problem. There's no way.
It wasn't actually the problem. What it was, a combination problem.
Yes.
Because whether you know it or not, pretty much any power supply you buy these days, right? And it's been true for many years, like since the year 2001, 2000 even, right? Is that computer power supplies are very smart. If you try to get a computer power supply to give you more electricity than it is capable of giving you, it will say no and turn off. That way it doesn't explode or anything. That is good. It's a smart power supply. Newer, even like super new power supplies, ones that you get, say, today, what they do, they have a newer feature. If you don't ask for enough power, they will turn off. Because if you're not asking for enough power, then something might be wrong. Because the computer asks for a whole bunch of power when you turn it on.
Yep. Now, it appears, from what I've read and researched, though I haven't verified this experimentally because I'm not the type to sit there with a voltimeter and mess with it.
Yeah, but it from what I've seen and all the evidence, I think this is 90% the case.
Yes, though there is another issue that we'll also get to.
Yep.
But it seems like the AB9 and a lot of other modern motherboards stage the activation of components in such a way as to not suddenly overburden the power supply.
So instead of turning on everything in your computer at once, it turns on one bit over here, then a bit over there, then a bit over, it turns on the CPU, then the memory, then this and then that. And the result of that is you don't ask the power supply for enough power, so the power supply starts turning on your computer, and then it turns off.
Yep. Now, I mean, that's the guess I've seen. I can't prove it. And the reason I say that is a lot of other people have said that on the internet. And two, I could get the power supply to power up longer and better and work a little bit more, but still not actually work, if I loaded it down with more stuff.
Yeah, the more stuff we plugged into the power supply, it would spin the fan for like a second longer, and then the computer would turn off.
It was kind of weird.
I think if we would have plugged in enough things, it would have turned on all the way.
But that wouldn't have been worth it.
Would have been worth it.
So basically, I ended up buying this, like, the crappiest power supply you could imagine, because it was the only power supply they had, really, at Best Buy.
Yeah, and he had to run to the Best Buy instead of waiting to buy a nice one on Newegg.
Yeah, because I couldn't wait any longer. And this crap power supply works perfectly.
Yeah.
Now, the other issue is that the Antec is all fancy. It has 3 rails of 12 volt, and each rail...
I'm not going to talk about the rails.
Suffice to say, it does look like, while the Antec power supplies are really nice, they can't provide enough power to any single 12-volt rail long enough to fully power up my system.
Yep. I'm not going to get into the thing about the rails, but I learned it all.
Suffice to say, expensive Antec power supply wouldn't work. Much crappier, off-brand, disgusting-looking power supply in a shady box worked perfectly. I'm still talking to Antec's support. I kept the thing around, but mainly because I really want Antec to give me a better power supply to make up for this.
Because the Antec power supply is much quieter and
quieter.
better.
It's silent. My computer is utterly silent except for the power supply.
It's silent mostly thanks to its Antec case.
Yes, but my case is really hot. I love this case so much. The only thing better was the same case.
Hey, Rim, are the panels sagging?
No, the panels aren't sagging yet. But according to the internet, within a month or two, the panels, the cold steel rolled panels, are going to start sagging.
Rolled
I guess.
steel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said cold steel rolled.
I know.
I said the right words in the wrong order.
Yep.
But yeah, I worked all that out. Computer wouldn't boot a little bit. I had to fiddle with the RAM timings to get it to go. That's just because, get this, it seems like all the nice motherboards can't handle that fancy gamer, super fast, low cast latency RAM. I also learned that based on the benchmarks, that super low latency, twice as much money, low voltage RAM isn't faster at all. No benchmark demonstrated any performance benefit whatsoever to using that so-called better RAM.
Yeah, a lot of stuff in computers, especially the overclocking gamer computer market, is a lot like the audiophile market, where they charge you a whole bunch of extra money for something that may not actually benefit you or doesn't actually cost them extra money to make.
Yep.
I
mean,
it's
back
a
in
lot
the day,
like monster cables.
Back in the day, I actually did a lot of research and looked at benchmarks and spent the extra money to buy lower cast latency RAM because the performance benchmarks did show a not dramatic, definitely measurable performance difference. Mm-hmm. And also the price difference wasn't that great. Nowadays, the price difference is ludicrous and there's no performance benefit at all. Quite.
So
also,
get whatever RAM's gonna work the best and get as much of it as you can.
No,
it does matter. Like if your computer can handle DDR 800, you don't
RAM,
want to get DDR 600.
The RAM speed matters crazily. The cast latency and the strobe latency don't matter at all.
So make sure you get the right speed. So if your computer gets DDR 800, get DDR 800. But just get as much as you can and don't worry about anything else except the speed and type of the RAM and the amount of it and the price.
What took me off guard was the fact that I used to always buy RAM from a few very, very specific manufacturers. I pretty much bought Corsair or Crucial. I used to buy Viking way back in the day.
Yeah. Corsair makes pretty cool RAM, plus Pirates.
Yeah. The thing is, those RAMs were very expensive compared to the RAM I ended up buying. And the RAM I ended up buying was like OCZ, whatever.
Yeah.
And it looks all ricey, and it's got this red heat spreaders on it. It's all fancy. But it was also really cheap, and you know what? It works perfectly.
Yeah. It's either going to work or it's not going to. And pretty much the only qualms I have about buying like off-brand stuff from Newegg is that I know that probably the vast majority of that off-brand stuff works, but I am taking a risk that it won't work, and thus taking a risk of suffering a pain in the ass. And I know that while there might be like a 90% chance of that off-brand stuff working, there's a 99% chance of the brand name stuff working. And sometimes I am willing to pay that more money just for that peace of mind and that this is going to work.
Yep.
And I know it's not going to be the problem.
But I ended up spending $100 to get 2 gigabytes of DDR 800. Oh, it was G-Skill, not OCZ.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I'd never heard of them before. They're somewhat new. They definitely cater to...
They're not that off-brand. They're just slightly off-brand.
They just cater to a demographic that is not me.
Yep.
Yeah, but the hardware aside, I got it all together and installed
Video
Windows.
card?
Oh, yeah, the video card. That's probably important because that was the component that I spent the most time thinking about.
Yep.
Because basically, I want a game, but I'm not willing to spend the $400 on a video card that I spent back in the day on the video card I was using up until now.
I usually buy a $300 video card.
Well, the other thing is, I realized that not many games have come out since Half-Life 2 that I really need to play, other than possibly Supreme Commander, and I wasn't willing to spend the money to get a computer that would play that well yet.
Yep, and the games that you do want to play in the future, like Team Fortress 2, are basically Half-Life 2. So
Yeah.
You just need to play Half-Life 2. And you know what? My computer with a GeForce FX 5900 5900 plays Half-Life 2 well enough.
What I ended up going with was the pretty much one, not the toppest of the line, but near the top of the pack of the 7000 series. I got a 7900 GS.
Yep.
With 256 megabytes of RAM.
Well, the reason, I think the logic was, you don't want to buy ATI. Oh, first, let me say something. People don't seem to realize this.
Don't buy ATI.
Not only that, but people still don't seem to understand. ATI makes chips to go on video cards, right? They also make the video cards. You cannot get, as far as I know, an ATI chip that is not on an ATI video card.
I don't actually know because I've never...
That's the way it was. I'm not sure if it's still that way, but I'm pretty sure it is still that way.
I've never given ATI my business, and every time I've had to use an ATI card, it's ended in misery.
I'm pretty sure the only way to get ATI chips is with 8 video cards manufactured by ATI.
It's not that way with NVIDIA. In fact, you can't just buy an NVIDIA video card.
No, NVIDIA only makes chips, and they sell those chips to people who then make video cards with those chips on them. And,
well, it used to matter back in the day because there were some people who took those chips and they made more solid, more reliable video cards. But nowadays, ignore the manufacturer of your video card. Just look at what NVIDIA chip it is, how much RAM it has, and all that business.
Well, it does appear that situation with ATI has changed slightly. There are some other brands of video card manufacturer that make video cards with ATI chips on them, but they all appear to be far inferior to the ATI product.
But I just bought some brand of video card. It didn't matter because it was a GeForce 7900 GS. And it's stupidly fast for all the games I'm going to play. And I think my plan is I got a high-end DirectX 9 card. Because no games need DirectX 10 yet. And I don't have Vista or anything.
And you're mostly going to be using Linux, so what do you care?
So I'm pretty much going to wait until there is a game that uses DirectX 10 that I need to be able to play well. And that will not play well enough on my current video card.
And that you're willing to pay for that and a copy of Vista in order to play.
Yeah, however, at that time, I probably will be willing to pay.
Maybe. It depends. It's got to be a damn good
Pretty
game.
much, I'm holding out on DirectX 10 for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a new line of GeForces that's out very, very recently, like days ago, or maybe possibly a few days in the future, maybe even today or tomorrow. That is like the bargain end of the DirectX 10 cards. They're like $100 or so. So those might be worth looking into. But, I don't know. Yeah. NVIDIA works. ATI doesn't. Here's an example of NVIDIA working and ATI not working for anyone out there. No OS on a computer. No operating system whatsoever, right? We have an ATI video card. It has an S-Video out hole. We connect that S-Video out with an S-Video cable to our television, and we turn the computer on. We don't see anything on the screen at all. There's no operating system. It has nothing to do with Linux or Windows or anything, but nothing shows up on the screen. We can't get the video output to work in Linux either, okay? So we replace it with an NVIDIA card, all right, which we connect the S-Video out to the television. Even before the operating system has a chance to go, the display is already on the television working properly. NVIDIA is good, ATI is not. I don't care if the ATI card at the present time happens to be a little faster for a little less money. It sucks. It's just not worth that slight performance increase in your Windows games to suffer the hassle of everything else ATI sucks at. All right, so now Rim had all the parts for his computer.
Yep.
And he had everything together.
Yep, and I installed Windows, and I immediately installed Steam after getting all my Windows updates.
And it worked just fine.
And then I played Counter-Strike for like 3 hours.
I haven't played Counter-Strike in years.
And you know what? I'm not as good as I used to be, but I punned some noobs, and I'm getting it back. And after about an hour of Icy World, I got my headshot AK skills back.
Oh, no, S.
Or my Death from Above Mac 10 attack, which I did like 4 times to the same guy earlier today.
Someone set up us the bomb.
So then I go to install Ubuntu and install all these other OSs to play with them. And I'm not going to go into the details. We had a few problems with the audio, getting everything set up, but we resolved all that. It turned out that my computer would crash. Well, not really crash, but it would freeze hard, permanently, with nothing in any of the system logs, no way to solve it, sort of cutting the power. And it would do this whenever I opened Firefox or Audacity.
Yeah, it happened pretty much all the time, sort of randomly. I mean, you could sometimes link it to times when you were doing things with high system activity.
Well, the thing is, I could very specifically recreate the freeze whenever I wanted. All I had to do was open Audacity, have more than 3 tracks, and try to play any selection from them. Try to export a wave from Audacity. Try to import more than like 7 tracks. Like, it would always freeze when I did any of those things.
But this wasn't an Audacity problem.
No,
you
because
could have probably made the problem happen with a bunch of programs you never used.
Well, I tried, and I couldn't with any... OpenOffice couldn't do it. I opened a bunch of different things. The only other thing that could do it is if I opened a bunch of tabs with Flash in Firefox. And those are the only 2 things, but nothing else would do it.
All right.
I tried a bunch of different OSs. I thought maybe I had some kernel support problems, so I tried to get a newer Debian. The stable Debian won't install because it has an old kernel. The testing Debian won't install because it has a bug that doesn't work with my hardware well.
Yes. Basically, the situation is that the newest version of the Linux kernel probably would have worked great, but the only way to get that newer version of the kernel was to use Gentoo and some horribly pain, because there aren't any Linux distributions that come with the very newest kernel. So the only way to get it is to use a distribution like Gentoo, where you build everything from source and you would get the newest kernel, or to build the kernel by hand. Basically, if you wanted that new kernel that made the computer work right, it would have been a pain in the ass. Meanwhile, all the Linux distributions out there that aren't a pain in the ass didn't have the newest kernel. And while some of them might have booted and been stable, they didn't support all of the hardware in the fancy new computer because they were old kernels.
I basically tried all those flavors of Linux I'd never tried before. I have a pile of installation and live CDs laying next to me. I was fiddling left and right. The crashes were happening in most of them. I was breaking down, and I was going to just fucking install Gentoo. As much as I hate Gentoo, I used Gentoo for the longest time, and while I respect it, it's not worth the problems it causes.
Yep. I discovered, in the meantime, a new Linux distribution we have yet to try on this computer called Sabayon, Sabayon.
We shouldn't really talk about it. We'll do a show on it once we play with it.
I just want to say that it's a live CD or a live DVD that you basically push a few buttons and it installs Gentoo without the hassle, and once it's installed, it's basically Gentoo without the effort. Of course, you need the effort once it's installed that Gentoo requires, but not the installation effort. The problem with it that I found so far is that it installs so much software, and most of it you don't want. And one of the beautiful things about Gentoo is that you only have to have the software you want and no other software.
But beside that, I was running out of things to do, and I decided that the last ditch is to force myself to upgrade the BIOS, because there might be a bug where Linux couldn't deal with it properly, but Windows could because Windows is tolerant or whatever. And if I update the BIOS, everything will be fine. And let me tell you, updating an 8-bit BIOS is not the pleasure it used to be, because the utility that used to be on the 8-bit website that would let you just from Windows update your BIOS, they stopped supporting and got rid of because they didn't trust it anymore or something.
I don't know what the hell the deal is. Back in the day, when everyone had a floppy drive, right, it was easy to update your BIOS because everyone had a floppy drive. You just make a BIOS boot floppy, you put it in, you turn the computer on, your BIOS is updated. Done. Now people don't have floppy drives anymore. And 8-bit saw this problem coming, and they made a program that you run in Windows. It's an EXE program. You would run it, it would update your BIOS, then you'd restart your computer. It worked on my computer that I have now. I've used it many times. There wasn't a problem with it, at least on my 8-bit NF7S. On Rim's new computer, we went to the 8-bit website, looked up his motherboard. The only way to update the BIOS on this new motherboard was with a floppy disk, and we could tell that he didn't have the newest version, so we needed to update it. And it was very difficult to do so.
Yep, and I still haven't done it yet due to the fact that I have 3 floppy drives sitting to the right of me. 2 of them function, 1 of them does not. Independent of that, it took a while to get my motherboard to recognize a floppy and deal with it, and then...
That's just because you didn't choose the right BIOS options to turn the floppy back on.
No, because even when I did that, then I plugged the cable in upside down because floppies don't have the nice tab.
So
like
it's basically
all
your fault and not the fault of the computer not working with floppy drives.
Well, also, there were 3 different areas. I had to enable all 3 to make the floppy drive work.
Well, you disabled them all. They were enabled by default. You just turned them off, and then you had to turn them on
Actually,
later.
no, they were disabled by default. Because the floppy and the parallel ATA and all that stuff, like the PCI, are this legacy crap that's on the motherboard in case you need it. They don't expect you to use it.
Yeah.
But, so I finally get that resolved. That didn't take long. It was just I had to plug it all in. We don't have a single functioning floppy disk. None of them worked.
Well, I think I found one that might work. But
Yeah, but I have
we tried a few and they didn't work.
Yeah, one of them seemed like it was working, but then I tried to boot it and it wouldn't work. And I'm trying to figure out, man, is the floppy still not working? Then I just discovered that it didn't actually write the data to the floppy. It just said it did. The floppy didn't even spin as far as I can tell.
Yeah, we've got a lot of floppy disks that we haven't used in years, and I'm not sure how many of them are good
Now,
and how
you know
many
what?
aren't.
The one floppy that was good, because it happened to be laying out, I rearranged all my games. I have disc 9 of the installation for Quest for Glory 4. That disc worked fine, but there's no way in hell I was going to use that disc.
Well, you could just copy the data off of it.
I didn't want to. I don't want to risk that disc in any capacity.
Don't risk that disc.
Don't risk that disc.
Yeah. Anyway, you lost my stack of CDRs.
I don't know where that stack of CDRs went.
So I'm gonna go buy like a tiny package of floppy disks and some CDRs.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I just want to point out that for some reason there was no technical reason that we could not make a boot CD-ROM and then do the BIOS from that. However,
oh yeah, I would have had to make a custom CD-ROM that had the BIOS on it.
Yes, it seems like like in Windows, if you want to make a bootable DOS floppy disk, there's just a button that does that. In Windows, Linux, nothing. There's no button that I can see to make a bootable DOS, keep mind you, not just bootable, CD-ROM.
Well, there is, but the thing is, what I would have had to do is create such a thing on my computer. There's various means to do it that are not trivial, and while I could have done them, it wasn't worth the effort as opposed to just
yeah,
floppy
you need
disk.
to like install Nero and then do a bunch of crap and then
Or
get
I
some
could have
files
like gotten
and-
free DOS, put it on a CD, and made it a bootable CD, and put all the files on
yeah,
it.
but that's not as trustworthy as using the Windows
However,
bootable floppy.
in my last-ditch effort, I tried doing the thing that, as in the past, almost always made a screwed-up Linux machine where you couldn't get anything else going work. I turned off ACPI and APIC, and now my computer's working perfectly.
Yeah, I remember there were some problems in the past with APIC and instability in the kernel.
Yep.
And I'm getting the feeling now that if the problems are still existing or if they come back up from the dead every time new motherboards come out, they should really just rewrite that whole module in the kernel.
It is definitely a problem with Linux, because I do point out that Windows works like a champ.
Yep. I think it's probably something that would work in 2.6.21. The problem is Ubuntu, which is the only easy-to-use and good distribution for us, is 2.6.20. And it's very difficult for us to get the newer kernel.
Yeah, well, it's not that it's difficult; it's that it's not worth the effort.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm saying.
Except I was
It's more
willing to put
difficult
far
than it's
more.
worth.
I was willing to put far more effort into solving the solution by another means.
Yes. And ACPI is the thing that controls, like, when your computer goes to sleep and hibernates. And
And that's always been a problem in Linux.
yeah, I mean, Linux is doing a lot better job of that. But it's basically, that stuff is really undocumented, and it's different with every single computer, and no one follows the rules. So, you know, with some computers, it just works perfectly, and in other computers, it doesn't work at all. So it depends, you know. Some people, like on my laptop, it kind of works, but sometimes it's a little buggy, but it won't screw me. But I guess on RIM's motherboard, it's so incompatible that it crashes.
Now, what I did is I just disabled them all in one fell swoop, and the computer worked. I might, whenever I feel like it, try using each one at a time to figure out if it's both of them or if it's just one of them.
It seemed like APIC to me, because that's very similar to the problem I had with my parents' computer in the past and APIC. Basically, there was this crazy problem, right, where if you had a Ubuntu, I think the one before Dapper, or maybe Dapper, I don't remember. I think the one before Dapper, and you had an motherboard with an NVIDIA integrated graphics processor, an onboard NVIDIA card that you were using, and you didn't have your RAM in dual channel mode, and you had the IO APIC on.
I remember when Scott described this to me, I couldn't believe that he had the patience to solve it, because I would have just said, you know what? It doesn't work, and gone home, because I don't like troubleshooting.
If you had
things
all
like that.
those things in combination, then the computer would sort of freeze randomly, similar to the way it was freezing for RIM. If you bought a new video card and used that instead of the integrated graphics processor, problem went away. If you got another stick of RAM and dual channel mode turned on, problem went away. If you turned the IO APIC off, problem went away. Used a newer version of Ubuntu, problem went away. So that shows you people are going to use probably what we've said now to say, oh, Linux, blah. And, well, yeah, kind of Linux, blah, on new hardware. The thing is, Look, think about that problem. That is such an obscure problem, and it only happens on the newest of awesomest hardware. Unless your hardware is like the bleeding edge craziness, Linux is going to work fine and it's not a problem for you.
Plus, I do note that the problem is solved and I can use the computer now. And the thing is, I'm so fickle. I was ready to just dump to Windows in a second. I'd be like, screw it, I'll just use Windows. But the only reason I didn't do that, and I kept trying to make Linux work, was that the one program that I really need, Resound, does not exist anywhere else. And I can't...
You could have built it in Cygwin or done a VMware or something.
You know what? I can't get it to build in Linux.
I can, but only on, like, Gen 2s.
Yeah, only on Gen 2. Try Ubuntu? No.
That's something that people need to understand, is that if you want to build, like, Linux software from source code, like, by hand, it'll most of the time work on most distributions, but... Only Gen 2 and distributions like it seem to have the pure GCC that will work 99.9% of the time. Like Ubuntu will only successfully build software like 90% of the time because it's not pure.
But I realize, I don't want to talk about this very long, but Resound is pretty much the perfect podcasting solution for Linux.
As far as what choices are currently available.
Well, no, I mean...
You could make something more perfect.
Well, yes, you could.
But it
However,
doesn't presently exist.
I looked around, and I tried a whole bunch of audio applications, and on my Windows, I pirated a whole bunch of things just to try them all out. Just to try them out. I was actually willing to purchase them. However, I discovered that almost every audio program out there, when it comes to single-track wave editing... Now, multi-track, those programs are all really nice, and they're a lot better than Audacity, I tell you what. But what they don't have is they lack certain critical functionality that I really need to do Geeknights or to do the other things I do with audio. And I wonder why they're not there.
It's like, are we the only people in the entire world who use these functions? That can't possibly be true.
And a lot of them will have the functions, but not to the level of control that I want. I mean, I want to control the raw math of whatever I'm doing. And while there are ways to do that with Nyquist things and plugins, it's already all there in Resound. And also, while the interface of Resound is really old looking, the way you interface with the audio is something that I haven't seen in any other program. And maybe it's just that people don't have to edit the volume of audio this quickly like I do, but I haven't found anything better. It's not a matter of, oh, I'm not used to it. It's a matter of, it takes fewer clicks to do the things I need to do in Resound than in any other program.
Yeah, it's like other programs can do what we do. However, even if you're the Grand Master, it will take you like an hour more to do it with that other program simply by the sheer number of clicks and processing time.
Also, and here's the funny bit, I'll end it on this, because Audacity crashed and, whatever, Resound didn't crash. It crashed on its own, but that's just because it's Resound, and we resolved that with Jack. But I had Resound, and that was the only program I could use to make the show. So I had to make the whole show in a single-track editor, which totally sucks. As a result, I had to get creative, and I learned that I made it, and I'm still tweaking it, but I was able to make a script in Resound that will make, process, and do the entire show from start to finish and create an MP3 when it's done.
Wow, so basically all you do is you edit out the coughs and the stuff that because you can't have a computer do that. Unless it has an AI.
I could, but it would be very difficult and prone to error.
It would be much easier to just do it by hand every night.
Yes.
And you just do that, and that takes how many minutes just to cut the things out? Click, click, push a button, click, click, push a button. It takes
about 1 second per 10 minutes of audio at this point to do that.
Yeah, and then you push a single button and the show is produced. No other audio application is capable of this. Even the incredibly expensive $1,000 professional ones. They can do it, but they're so much less efficient in the user interface. Meanwhile, this free open source one that's kind of got this junky interface that's ugly and blah, it does it in one button.
Part of the problem is just that those expensive programs do what they do very well. And if you were using them for the purposes for which they are intended...
Like making music in a music studio, or you work in a radio studio, or there's a live concert, and
they're great.
Work in the soundboard.
When I took digital audio at RIT and we used Pro Tools was the motherfucking bomb when it came to do it. It was great. I loved it. We recorded everything multi-track in the studio, and I could just move stuff around, and it was great. And while it was slow and somewhat inefficient to edit things compared to Resound, or even Audacity in some cases, I didn't need to do it quickly because you're not editing like when you're making music. You're editing it slowly. You're checking to make sure things work. You're doing things very precisely. And it's just, none of those things are efficient for the fast and loose, edit an hour of audio and throw it up on the air 10 minutes later thing that we do.
Yeah, I mean, if we made a podcast once a week or once a month or less often than 4 days a week, right, then we could probably go out and get one of those digital mixers, and it would record both of us on 2 separate tracks, and we could edit ourselves individually and mix it together, and it would be this, double awesome professional job. But when you're doing it 4 days a week, you don't have time for that. You need something more efficient. And I really think that if someone made an audio application that incorporated the powerful multi-track features of, say, Pro Tools or Audition with the single track post-production editing efficiency of Resound, that you could make amazing audio in even less time than has ever been done before.
And on that note, I think we're done because I smell tofu downstairs and I want to turn my AC back on now that my room doesn't smell like burning.
And also, one day I'm going to make a podcasting application that is perfect.
Basically, we just need to take the interface and the power of Resound and write a program that does that.
Well, basically, I take the code of Resound that does the audio part and replace the rest.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Maybe we could add it all to that Joe Kosher, which has promise, but is currently useless.
Yeah, open source, that's what the point is.
Yeah. This has been Geeknights with Rim and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for the opening music.
Be sure to visit our website at www.frontrowcrew.com, where you'll find show notes, links, our awesome forum, a link to our Frapper map, and links to all the RSS feeds.
We say feeds plural because Geeknights airs 4 nights a week, covering 4 different brands of geekery. Mondays are science and technology. Tuesdays, we have video games, board games, and RPGs. Wednesdays are anime, manga, comic nights. And Thursdays are the catch-alls for various rants and tomfoolery.
You can send us feedback by email to geeknights@frontrowcrew.com. Or you can send audio feedback via Odeo. Just click the link that says Send Me an Audio on the right side of our website.
If you like what you hear, you can catch the last 100 episodes in iTunes or in your favorite podcatcher. For the complete archives, visit the website, which has everything.
Geeknights is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 2.5 license. This means you can do whatever you want with it as long as you give us credit, don't make money, and share it in kind. Geeknights is recorded live with no studio and no audience. But unlike those other late shows, it's actually recorded at night.